How's it going, Cliff?
Good, how you be?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Good, thanks.
Oh, I already asked you that. Well, anyway. Well, it's good to be here again. I hope you don't mind. I'm going to try and talk loudly. I don't mean to be yelling at you.
No, please do. Go right ahead.
I want people to hear.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, while I was listening to you talk to that very smart young lady, you brought up that you have 4 different types of evidence that you like to bring towards your beliefs. One was historical, one was philosophical, one was emotional, and then experiential. Am I right? Mm-hmm. Can you go a little bit more in depth about experiential and emotional evidence for your religion or the existence of God, whichever one
you bet
you think it adds to?
Emotionally, I am outraged over date rape, the abuse of an innocent child, and that is why I cannot be a moral relativist. Because moral relativism does not square with my experience of life. If morality is relative, I have no basis for being outraged over date rape or the abuse of an innocent child. What is, and it's all relative.
Moral relativism isn't the idea that people don't have innate moral reactions to moral situations. It's the idea that it's not concreted in any actual absolute truth, any beyond natural absolute truth. Moral relativists, we do expect to see people like you to be outraged by date rape and things like that. Moral judgments are a universal truth. Everyone believes that we have judgments about the way that we look at moral situations, but moral relativism doesn't mean that we don't believe that moral ideas even exist. Moral ideas, that it's again, it's concreted in a form of reality that's just different than supernatural. Your belief is that moral absolutes are concrete in the supernatural. Moral relativists will say that, well, it's born out of people's innate instincts about moral situations, and that's why we see such moral differences across different cultures. A lot of people don't agree on specific moral questions. There are some that, we all baseline agree because they're instinctually some of the most important to us. Don't murder. Across the board, across humanity, most people will believe that. Now, you'll have some people who were born and probably have something wrong with them that affects them and makes them look at the question a little bit differently. But across the board, there are baseline morals that most cultures will agree because they serve our instincts. Don't murder, don't lie, don't steal. These types of things are universally positive for all members of all societies. But again, morals are relative in the sense that there are certain societies that have different opinions about different things. You've said yourself, back in the days of the Bible, it was morally incorrect to cut your hair short because it made you look like a prostitute. That was the moral of the time. And because the social circumstances have changed in the way that we look at that issue today, we wouldn't say that that's a moral judgment. Morals tend, I just want to make concrete that that's the idea of moral relativism, not the idea that, oh, well, morals they're this fictitious, crazy, nonsensical thing, and everyone has their own opinions, and whatever you think matters. So, but, and I don't think that a belief that has its morals rooted in absolute truth is evident of its merit. I mean, you can say, yes, we all feel that we have moral truths. We feel moral truths in the universe, and therefore that feeling points to the idea that, yes, there are actual moral truths. I don't think that the feeling of moral truths has anything to do with its truth in any respect. I think that it can be an easy perception to mistake. If it's a natural instinct, then we would perceive it as something that's just innately true. But what was your experiential argument again?
Very simple. Nuremberg Trials, 1946 to 1949. 24 Nazi officers being tried. Brilliant Nazi officer. He stands up, looks the Allied judge in the face, and says, "Who do you think you are? Coming from outside our culture of Germany Nazi Germany, to judge us? You have no right to do that. These 24 Nazi officers simply did what their culture called them and taught them to do. The Nuremberg Trials shut down. He was a brilliant guy. Until Robert Jackson stood up and said, wait a second, there is a law above the law of a culture. And according to that law, gassing Jews is evil. And the Nuremberg Trials kicked back into gear. What was Robert Jackson appealing to? The American Council was appealing to a moral law above the law of a culture, and saying that is why an American, an Englishman, can come to Nazi Germany and try the Nazis and condemn them as being unjust for gassing Jews.
Okay, well, a couple points on that. One, the Nazis were tried under international law. It was decided by the entire world that what they did was egregious. So,
Were
in
some
a sense,
Eskimos there?
I'm sorry.
Were some Eskimos there?
I
It wasn't the entire world. Come on, sir. It was
Okay.
the Allies. You know very well it was the Allies. It was the Allies who came in there, and that Nazi lawyer was brilliant. And he pinned those Allies with, who do you think you are, coming to our culture and judging us?
But I will state that higher moral power that you're saying that they were appealing to, I think that it's just indicative of the feelings that most cultures feel. I mean, like that highest sense of moral truth. Yes, it feels incredibly concrete, and it's because it's shared by most of humanity in a large respect. And even if I was to concede to your point that, oh, okay, well,
You're not going to concede, so let's go on to the next point, okay? You and I both know that. We've talked long enough before. You're not going to concede, so let's forget it, okay? The next, you asked me the question about my experience, okay? So the experience that I've had of love, I'm still answering you, okay? And I know well enough, I know you well enough because we've talked before that you're not going to concede, okay? So fair, you know, I'm sorry. So, love. I experience love. I dish out love. I also dish out apathy and hatred. I am convinced I don't have to do either. My experience tells me I choose. The existence of love and the existence of free will is solid evidence that there is more to reality than matter and energy. There's got to be some type of God who creates us with a soul. Yes, he creates us matter and energy, but we have a free will. We have a soul, a personhood, individuality.
I will.
That's my experience.
Okay, yeah. I've heard you make the point multiple times when you talk to agnostics or atheists, where you say that their naturalistic worldview means that they only believe in two things, matter and energy. And I would say that there's one other thing that you don't think about very often, which is concept. Naturalists 100% believe in the reality of conceptualism.
What's a concept?
Mathematics. Mathematics is a concept.
Okay,
That is a
fine,
concrete
mathematics.
reality that is not matter, it's not energy, but it's very, very real.
All right.
So that's one thing that opens up the atheistic worldview that you attribute to most people, because we do believe in concept and concept that plays to our emotions. It's not necessarily concrete in matter or energy, but it's the way that objects relate to each other in the universe.
Sure, mathematics is part of the reason I believe God exists. Mathematics, the thinking ability that we have to understand mathematical concepts, the amazing nature of the human mind. Is it more reasonable to think that this human mind comes from the non-rational, or is it more reasonable to believe that this rational mind comes from a rational mind? For me, that's an easy one to answer. And yet what my atheist friends are asking me to believe is this amazing mind that can understand concepts like mathematics comes from the non-rational or the irrational. That is ludicrous for me, philosophically. It is far more reasonable for me to believe the rational mind comes from a rational mind than to believe that the rational mind comes from the non-rational or the irrational. So that's another part of my experience that points me to God of some type.
But I think we're going to probably start to get into the whole nothing from nothing debate, the very famous one. I would love to have that conversation with you, because I have such an issue with the nothing from nothing debate, because people constantly, they'll say, you have to concede to the natural law that nothing can come from nothing, and in order to keep this natural law together and to have it make sense, you have to break natural law, and there must be a God. I don't see how. It just seems like a conflict of reason to me, that the idea, the logic behind God is that he is the only answer to keeping the rational law of nothing can come from nothing into the lexicon of our thinking. You have to have God, because otherwise you would have to concede that nothing could potentially come from nothing, or that we don't know exactly how it could have come into existence.
I'm not saying that. What I am saying is, an atheist has made a horrible decision to limit reality. Albert Einstein said, I know less than 1% of all there is to know. An atheist is someone who says, I know there is no God. I know there is no mind behind the universe. My point
I'd like
is,
to point out, I'm not an atheist.
Come on.
I am an agnostic.
all right, well then people ask me, why are you a theist, Cliff? And I'm a theist because it seems to me to be more reasonable to believe there's an intelligent mind who gave me a rational mind than it is to believe that my rational mind comes from the non-rational or the irrational.
But let's get back to the nothing from nothing argument. What is the most basic reason that you're a theist? Is it that nothing from nothing argument you don't believe?
No, it's not.
Okay.
No.
What is it?
But I've said it out here many, many times, and I'd love Stuart to answer the issue. So Stuart, go to it.
Well, I'm going to hit your first one.
Hi, Stuart.
How are you?
Never spoken to you before, but it's
nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Yeah. So let's go back to your emotions question. You started out with saying, let's talk about the emotions, right?
Sure.
And I think you also said self-concept. So let's talk about self-regard, self-concept, identity. How do those form an understanding of, okay, what is the most durable way of looking at yourself? How can a secular position versus a Christian understanding of how you look at yourself give you a better sense of self, more positive emotions, make you happier? Here's my position, and then you go. Since you brought it up, I love that you brought it up, because you're right. We've gone on the moral one, we've gone on all of these so many times. Let's go with the emotions. Me personally, why am I a theist? I am a theist because I agree with Martin Seligman, the book The Weariness of the Self, all these psychological studies today that are saying the secular understanding of the self is as follows. We live in a success, autonomistic, individualistic culture where we are success-oriented beings, and if we are secular, that means you better be successful or you're going to get in some trouble. Some kind of, you're going to criticize yourself in some way, or you're going to receive criticism from somewhere else. Because, hey man, you just weren't a success. So your identity is lost in some way. So me and my psychologist friends would say, you need to find something outside of yourself. So even my Hindu friends, if you find something outside of yourself to live for, God, then all of a sudden you are entering into the equation of, okay, my fragile self doesn't have to stand up for itself and, gosh, find meaning in life, find purpose in life. So you hear self nonstop, right, in our culture today. All of our talk now is self-based. One more second. If you get criticized, you better stand up for yourself, right? You got a hot date tonight? You better be yourself, right? Okay. A man earlier talked about the soul, though, and that's what these psychologists are getting back to. If you want positive self-worth and identity, you need to get away from self-talk, which secularism always goes back to. It's all about the self, right? And you better find something that transcends yourself and understanding of, okay, I have a soul. I'm a little bit more than just being successful here at this university. I'm a little bit more than just figuring out what kind of job I have to do after I graduate, right? So an understanding from the Christian perspective is you have an identity that nothing can shake. The Apostle Paul talked about in 2 Corinthians chapter 4 that he basically puts us in a courtroom setting and says, it doesn't matter what any person thinks about you. I don't even care what I think about myself. It's only what God thinks of me is what counts. And so when I have someone who I'm sitting with who really gets that and understands that, they have a secure identity, self-worth, and an emotional world that is intact because they understand, wow, I am loved by the creator of the universe.
Yes. The Christian philosophy does yield a nice psychological reaction.
You said emotions, so I brought it
Well,
down.
yeah, no, and I tend to agree with that. I know a lot of Christian people. My best friend is an avid Christian. He's very, very sweet, smart guy. It yields a nice way of looking at the world and everything, but I will submit to you that no matter how nice the philosophy is, it does not one iota move it towards the answer of it being true.
Well, you asked the question, though.
Well, no. I'm saying, I was asking how does that evidence towards its truth? And there's that's not evidence towards
If it's experiential, if it's in my experience, that's pointing to that's true, right? It's not just evidentially, it's not just intellectual, it's got to be experiential, experiencing it through your emotions as well, right?
What I'm suggesting is
man.
that what you said was that the Christian philosophy is a positive experience. It yields positive results in the minds of its believers. That may be true. But that does not point to
so help me then.
Doctrine
from an atheistic, secular perspective. Agnostic. Help me. How do you form a secure identity? And how, let's take, your emotions are wrecked through suffering, right? How do you deal with suffering as an agnostic? Those two.
That has nothing to do with the truth of the matter. No matter how empty or sad the philosophy that I may hold is, and I don't even personally think that it is. I think it's so open that it
So
lends
it has nothing to do with
itself.
the matter.
Well, excuse me. one
Your
more time.
worldview, your religion, what motivates and drives you has nothing to do with your sense of self, and it has nothing to do with where meaning and purpose comes from.
I'm saying that
I'm lost.
No matter how sad that philosophy might be, or how you view the atheistic philosophy, that doesn't mean that it's not true.
I agree. Totally agree with you.
But that's the point that's being made, and that's
No. It's only a part of the puzzle. It's one little part of the puzzle. We're talking about emotions, right?
Okay.
Experience.
So you're wondering.
I don't know. Yeah.
Right, so you're being intellectually dishonest. You know very well that out here before, you and I have talked, you've asked me why I believe God exists, and I have given you evidence. I've gone intellect to intellect. Now, just now you asked me, okay, now what is there more evidence that God exists? And I said yes, intellect, experience, emotions. Remember? And so both Stuart and I have just been explaining the emotional. I agree with you. You should not believe God exists because it makes me feel comfortable. You should not believe in Jesus Christ because Jesus brings me joy. Don't do that. But you asked the question, and we're answering your question, which is, come on, Cliff, there's the intellect, but now you're talking about emotions and experience? What are you talking about? And we were answering the question you asked. So don't boomerang on us now and say, well, you don't expect me to believe in God or Christ because of emotions and experience. You're right. Those are the different angles, though.
I'm suggesting that that's not evidence, because it's not pointing towards the idea of God. It's pointing towards the idea is nice. Really, that like, explain to me how emotions or experience is evidence of there being a God.
You bet. Sir, if your experience of life tells you something, I better listen very carefully to your experience. Because your experience is real. Unless you're lying to me. If you're lying to me, shame on you. But if you're telling me, Cliff, I've had this experience, and this has helped me in life, I better listen to you. Because that's your very real substantive. It's your life, sir. It's your experience. So we're standing here saying, the experience of knowing Christ is that there comes a secure identity of person. And what he does is, he works with mentally sick people. And he watches mentally sick people get healthy. Well, guess what? That's good. I hope you don't need me to tell you that.
I will just fundamentally disagree with the idea that the Christian philosophy yielding the result of a positive identity or an identity at all is evident of its merits as a truthful statement. So I will.
Okay.
We just fundamentally disagree there.
All right.
That's fine.
You bet.
Now, yeah, let's let this
All right.
go.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Good to see you.
Good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you. One of the reasons I enjoy reading the Bible is because of the brutal honesty of the authors. In Psalm 73, the psalmist is clearly struggling with doubt. He writes, "But as for me, my feet had almost slipped. I had nearly lost my foothold. For I envied the arrogant when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. They have no struggles. Their bodies are healthy and strong. And me? I'm losing. I'm getting beaten up. I'm sick." And so the psalmist talks about how he began to envy the arrogant, envy the wicked, because they have no problems, no struggles. It seems like the sun just shines on them and they prosper and succeed. Then he entered the sanctuary of God, which is just a poetic way of saying he entered the presence of God. And in the presence of God, God gave him an eternal perspective. And the psalmist began to realize that in the long run, evil will ultimately lose because there will be a day of judgment and God will destroy evil. And then at the end of Psalm 73, verses 23 through 26, he comes out with one of the most beautiful statements in the Psalms when he writes, "Yet I am always with you. You hold me by my right hand, you guide me with your counsel, and afterward you will take me into glory. Whom have I in heaven but you? And being with you, I desire nothing on earth. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever." The psalmist understood, regardless of how much the wicked prosper and succeed, regardless of how many people who try and do good fail and get beaten, God is with us when we trust in Him. The witness of God is crucial. Now, what I like about the psalmist is the way he dealt with his doubts. He talked to God about his doubts. He didn't suppress his doubts. He didn't sweep them under the rug and deny them. He talked to God about them. He prayed through his doubts. That is crucial for all of us in handling doubt. Pray through your doubts. Talk to God about your doubts. Secondly, realize that when you doubt, what is happening is there is a competing belief that you are seriously entertaining. That's a challenge to realize. Too many people think, I doubt, and that means I'm just doubting what I believe. No, you're not just doubting what you believe. There's a competitive streak to doubt. There's a competing belief that is wooing you, that is seeking your allegiance. So figure that out. Analyze, what is the option that is so attractive to me that I'm beginning to doubt what I believe? The next step in handling doubts is understand and analyze both what you believe and the competing belief, looking for problems. I, as a follower of Christ, along with the psalmist, struggle with, why do innocent people get hurt so deeply? It's not right. It's wrong. I don't know how many people have said to me in an outrage, if God was really good and if He really was loving and powerful, He would not have allowed that evil tragedy to occur. Here's the problem. Although that is a problem, there's a bigger problem. And the bigger problem is, if there is no God, there's no basis for outrage. For you see, if there is no God, you have a bigger problem with evil. Evil doesn't exist. Because if there is no God, there is no basis for the distinctiveness between good and evil. If there is no God, there's no mind prior to the human mind who defines what is good and what is evil. Which means, if there is no God, morality is relative. And yet you can't live that out. I can't live that out. Nobody can. Why? Because when you get married and your spouse hurts you verbally or by something they do, it really hurts. And you look them in the face and say, you should not, you ought not to have done that. That was wrong. No, there's no such thing as really wrong. It's relatively wrong. You can't live that out. Neither can I. Why? because you have a conscience and you have a rational mind. And your conscience and your rational mind inform you that certain things are right and other things are wrong. And guess what, friends? Evil is real. Evil is not just the construction of the Enlightenment. Evil is not just the construction of an ethicist on an Ivy League campus. Every single human being on the planet has a conscience, which means we all are able to understand the difference between justice and injustice, right and wrong, good and evil. And the only reason that evil really exists, and the only reason goodness really exists, is because there is a God who has defined what good is and what evil is. And you and I, by exercising our consciences and our rational minds, can tie into reality. You struggle with doubts, I struggle with doubts. What you and I ought to do is, when we doubt, is examine alternate beliefs. In other words, learn to doubt your doubts. Learn to hold on to an accurate picture of God. There are so many faulty assumptions floating around about God. Many people think, if God is really good, I should have a red carpet ride through life. If God is really fair, then all wicked people should lose. Those are false expectations. Why? Because the all-powerful God has chosen to partially limit his power by creating us with a free will. Why did he do that? Because he loves us, and he wants us to love him. And love, in order to be real, must be free. It cannot be manipulated. It cannot be coerced. And that is why the cross of Christ is so powerful. Jesus Christ bled and died on a cross, offering you and me an option, a gift, forgiveness, reconciliation with God, and eternal life. You and I don't have to accept Christ. We don't have to respond to his love positively. We can be apathetic, we can ignore him, we can outright reject him. Or we can choose to trust in him. I'm asking you, isn't it time for you to move beyond alternative options to Christ? Because there are really big problems with every one of those alternatives. Isn't it time for you to put your faith and trust in Jesus Christ? Because the evidence is he really does love you. He really is a good God. Give him a chance. Read the Gospels. Examine him carefully. And then, based on the evidence of his trustworthiness, put your faith in him. God bless you as you make that most important decision. I'm the pastor of Grace Community Church. We meet every Sunday morning at 9:30 at Grace Farms, which is located at 365 Lukeswood Road, New Canaan, Connecticut. I'd love to invite you to join us this Sunday for our 9:30 service. Thanks for joining us for these few minutes. Have a great day.